For the lateness, I was in a meeting, and that's no excuse. And thank you for your work at the hearings and efficiency and questions. Okay, we have a voting session. We, I think, can get through this list. So let's start from the top, SB 13. I'm not sure whose bill that is.
That's me.
Okay.
So SB 13, Certified Nursing Assistant Certificate Renewal Training Program Requirements. This is sponsored by Senator Eckhart. This bill alters the qualifications for renewal for nursing assistant certificates prior to its expiration. The bill allows a CNA that seeks certificate renewal who did not complete 16 hours of active practice to either complete an approved nursing training program or an approved nursing training refresher program. Under current law, a CNA seeking renewal must show either 16 hours of active training or completion of an approved nursing assistant training program. The bill also gives the board the authority to specify the instances under which the CNA is required to either complete the training program or the refresher course, and to specify the circumstances under which the particular training hours that are satisfactory to be completed must be met. There was no opposition and there are no amendments.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion? I'll entertain a motion. Senator Gallion, seconded by Senator Riley. Discussion on the bill. There are no amendments. Discussion on the bill. Going a second time, seeing none. Will anybody be voting in opposition to the bill? Seeing not, it's unanimous, 11-0. And SB 13 will go to the floor. Next bill.
Senate Bill 104, Public and Non-Public Schools, Electric.
04, not 104.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I was starting the wrong one. Senate Bill 40, Higher Education, Richard W. Collins III Leadership with Honors Scholarship, Bowie State. This bill allows students at Bowie State University to receive more than 25% of the annual grant money for the Collins Leadership with Honors Scholarship program by removing the requirement that exactly 25% of the annual grant money be awarded to BSU students. Any remaining grant money, rather than 75% of the money, must be awarded to students at other historically black colleges and universities. There were no amendments and no opposition at the hearing.
It's been moved by Senator Simonaire, seconded by Senator Lamb. Discussion on the bill, on the Richard W. Collins III Scholarship. Senator Ellis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So because of that brutal hearing schedule, I'm having trouble with these numbers here. So what's the 25% and the 75%? What is it now and what will it be?
So what happens is that there is an existing grant program that was drafted that Bowie State had to receive 25% of the funding. So Bowie State actually has the largest program here for, what do you call it? That's correct, thank you. They have the largest ROTC program. In fact, some of the HBCUs don't have one at all. And what was happening is the money was being left on the table because of the way it was drafted. So this bill corrects that and allows the money to be used completely throughout the year. So if, say, 70% of the students who need this money are at Bowie State, that they can have it while not freezing out the other students at HBCUs.
So it went from being a ceiling to a floor at Bowie State.
Okay.
So they could go, instead of being capped at 25%, if they had more need there, it could go to 50%, particularly if the other HBCUs, Maryland Eastern Shore, had less of a need or demand.
Okay. And this goes just to students enrolled in the ROTC? Okay. Great.
Only.
Okay. And Maryland HBCUs only?
Correct.
Yeah, I know going through ROTC at College Park, we had one of the few Air Force units in the area, so we have students come from other schools there. So these other HBCUs that don't have a ROTC program, how will they use this money? I'm not sure.
They don't. If you don't have students or a program, then the students don't qualify for the grant money.
Okay. So Bowie has the only ROTC.
No, it has the largest.
The largest. Okay.
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions or discussion on the bill? I think it's been moved. I think we're already on. I don't see anybody objecting to the bill or not wanting to vote it with the majority. Seeing none, Senate Bill 40 passes unanimously and will go to the floor. Next.
Senate Bill 82, State Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists, Maryland Music Therapists Act. This is sponsored by Senator Augustine. So this bill requires the licensure of music therapists by January 1st, 2022 by the Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists. The bill delineates what the practice of music therapy is in a non-exhaustive list. The bill establishes licensing requirements and qualifications, education, training, and clinical hour requirements, and creates expiration, renewal, suspension, and revocation procedures. The bill establishes a sunset review under the Maryland Program Evaluation Act. The bill establishes the Music Therapist Advisory Committee and consequently provides for its terms, leadership, responsibilities, and its meetings. The bill requires the Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists to oversee licensure and ethics of the licensees and to set reasonable fees. There wasn't necessarily unfavorable testimony, but informational testimony was provided by the licensed clinical professional counselors saying that they did not support the inclusion of licensed music therapists under their branch. There is one sponsor amendment sponsored by Senator Augustine that intends to cure that dispute. So the amendment transfers the licensed music therapist from the Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists to the Board of Examiners for Audiologists, Hearing Aid Dispensers, and Speech-Language Pathologists. The amendment also does quite a few other things. It obviously is a technical amendment, renames the subtitle. It removes the Music Therapist Advisory Committee, and instead it adds 2 licensed music therapist seats to the Board of Examiners. It provides that the governor appoint these seats. Under the amendment, a person may hold a bachelor's or its equivalent, including clinical training, and thus the amendment removes those 1,200 clinical hours that I did not specifically mention, but was included and listed under those licensing requirements. And the amendment also removes a sunset review and permits the board to disseminate music therapy information to licensed music therapists.
Let's first get the bill on the floor. Is there a motion? It's been moved. Is there a second? Okay. Does anybody want to offer, I don't know, the Senator Augustine's amendments, which takes it from the counselor board to the speech and audiology board? Or anybody want to discuss it? Senator Washington.
Yeah, and I apologize for not seeing it in advance. So so he's attempting to cure it and sends it to the audiologist. Are there other therapists that are underneath? I guess this is, I'm asking, are there other therapists that are underneath the examiners for audiologists and hearing aid and speech?
So, so the Board of Examiners is an exhaustive list, so it covers audiologists, hearing aid dispensers, speech-language pathologists.
Oh, and you would add music.
Right, and we would add and music therapists to that.
Okay. All righty.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
You favorable on the amendment? Second. And the bill?
On the amendment, shifting it from the counselors to the audiologists. Discussion? Sure.
My mic is not as
Senator
happy
Washington?
as it used to be.
Senator Washington, could you turn off your mic?
Sorry about
We
that.
pull away from the other.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we happen to know whether the audiologists are happy about this? Are they willing to do the work?
So we haven't received any testimony, favorable or unfavorable, from the audiologist board.
So I have a great deal of respect for Senator Augustine, but I know that Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes has been working on this issue for a long time. And I guess I'd personally like to check in with her and with the audiologist to just see whether everyone's copacetic with that, because it doesn't make any sense to set up a difference between the Senate bill and the House bill if she's not going to love his amendments.
Okay. I'm going to consider that a hold. I think that you're touching a nerve everyone is sympathetic to. So we'll put that as a hold. We'll come back to that at a future voting session. So 82 is a hold for now. Next, please.
Senate Bill 104, Public and Non-Public Schools, Electric Retractable Room Partitions, Operation Requirements. This bill prohibits an employee of a public or non-public school from operating an electric retractable room partition under specified circumstances. Annual safety reviews, evaluations, or exercises must include information and demonstrations regarding the safe operation of an electric retractable room partition. The Maryland State Department of Education must develop and disseminate model safety guidelines to each local school board and non-public school, including publishing them on its website. There are no amendments and no opposition.
Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Is there an indication of whether this is prospective, where newly installed electric retractable room partitions are affected, or will they have to go back and refit all the existing partitions?
There's no requirement that they have to adopt, for example, new safety sensors or anything like that. This is more about operation requirements. So, for example, they have to publish guidelines that say that students can't be in the room at the time, and then they have to do some annual things where they make sure the equipment is working properly, and that they demonstrate to teachers, if they're going to be operating the equipment, that it operated in this manner, those kind of things. But there's no retrofitting required in the bill.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm a little confused. I don't know if this was the bill that had the electric eye. Is this the same one? Yep. So the question was, do they have to install those devices if they currently don't have them?
The answer is no.
Okay.
On page 2, it says the safety sensor, if it's electric, or, well, then it says no students are present in the school building, or the room is located or locked, otherwise free of inaccessible to students. So it's my reading they have a choice of those three things.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, April.
Now, prospectively, it's the same thing, correct?
Correct.
Discussion on the bill. Well, I mean, you have a lot of options here, but I must say, and I was approached by these people a couple of years ago when the thing in Northern Virginia took place. It's tough to legislate behavior where people are irresponsible. They should be dealt with. It's my understanding there have been 11 incidents over the last 5 years in 137,000 schools. So I guess it doesn't require the sensor eye, but no students can be in the building, which means it has to be done before or after school. or it must be free of inaccessible students, which I wrote the State Board of Education and asked whether there were procedures in the jurisdictions, and they checked and said each jurisdiction did have some policy in place. So, I feel better there's a third choice of just not having any students in the room. I was concerned if it was going to require the sensor eye, which was $5,000, and the need to retrofit or do it prospectively. So I've got some concerns, but not enough to say that we need to stop the bill. So I just wanted to put that out there. Further discussion on the bill. Will anybody be objecting to the bill? Seeing none, it's unanimous. I convince myself. Okay, next bill.
Senate Bill 155, Higher Education, Tuition Exemption for Foster Care Recipients and Homeless Youth, Alterations and Reports. This bill expands the definition of homeless youth who are eligible to receive a tuition waiver at a public institution of higher education by removing the requirements that the youth, 1, be unaccompanied, and 2, qualify as independent student under federal law. The bill also alters the method by which a financial aid administrator determines that an individual is a homeless youth for the purposes of a tuition waiver by repealing an annual verification requirement. In addition, a foster care recipient or homeless youth who receives a tuition waiver must receive priority consideration for on-campus housing. Each public institution of higher education must make the application for the tuition waiver available to current and prospective students and notify students about the application. Each public institution of higher education must establish an annual appeals process for the tuition waiver as specified. There is one amendment from the sponsor starting on page 37 of your packet, and a reprint also starting on page 41 of the packet. What these amendments do is establish a list of various entities that can verify an individual as a homeless youth within 24 months prior to the enrollment at or while enrolled at a public institution of higher education, requires a public institution of higher education on request of the student to notify another public institution of higher education in which the student plans to subsequently enroll of the student's designation as a homeless youth, and the new public IHE must then designate that student as a homeless youth on receipt of this notification. Third, this requires a public IHE to establish a homeless and foster youth liaison in the financial aid office or other appropriate office with specified qualifications and duties. And finally, requires a specified report of each public IHE to report specified data disaggregated by age, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender identity, and requires MHEC to publish the compilation of these reports on its website within a specified period of time.
Okay, let's first get the bill on the floor. It's moved by Senator Washington. Is there a second? Senator Ellis or Senator Lamb? There is an amendment. I assume, Senator Washington, you'd like to move that amendment? And second, yes, it's been seconded. Okay, discussion on the amendment. Do you want to speak to it, Senator Washington?
Yes, I just want to let you know that we worked very closely with all the entities to draft these amendments, and you won't find, I just want to say that, so the corrections, also based on hearings that we got from across the street, and it's, again, to make it work best for all involved. So that's I ask for your support of the amendments.
Okay, discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, does anybody object to the amendment? If not, we'll adopt the amendment. Okay, the bill as amended is on the floor. It's open for discussion. Senator Simon-Ayer.
Thank you, and I appreciate your work on our foster and homeless.
Senator Washington, could you mic off just so it gets louder for everybody else?
So I'm looking at the reprint, I guess, on page 42 of our packet. And I see it striking on line 20, that language about the federal act, and then I guess it uses that, but says during the if they were any time during the last 2 years. So what's the rationale of saying, so somebody was homeless, now they're in a home, they got a good loving family, they've been there a year, now they've been there 2 years, and is it just the fact that the time has gone by opposed to criteria that, they're in and out or something like that?
That question. So it's addressing the having to annually certify and that it does take some time for the youth to get adjusted, and so they don't want to become ineligible. So, for example, they get stable, and then all of a sudden they become ineligible, and then they go back into homelessness. So it is trying to keep this revolving door from happening. Again, this was just to address some of the concerns expressed, to sort of narrow it down so that it isn't completely open-ended, but that it's focused on this 2-year period.
And I understand your intention.
Yeah.
And we want the money to go to them. I understand that, and I agree with that. But is this creating a situation where someone, like Annie, as it were, gets adopted or comes into a family, they make a lot of money, and they're settled for, a year and a half with them, and they're getting tuition free from somebody who's making quite a bit of income? I'm just saying, I understand the going in and out. It's just, is there any other criteria as far as them getting the free education if they're in a family, they've been there established for a while, and they've got quite a bit of income, and they really don't need the state's assistance?
I hear what you're saying there, but that is not a scenario that we contemplate or are worried about. Generally speaking, this is not an adoption situation. This is that the student is homeless, that they are either a part of a foster care system. We provide those. We provide free tuition for those persons, and so we want to make sure we're not excluding individuals that are otherwise qualified. And currently, the fact of the matter is, currently our law is excluding individuals who would qualify if they were in any other state.
Go to Ms. Goodman.
So Senator Simonaire, that won't happen because they still have to qualify under the federal act, and that would exclude those individuals in which you are referencing. So as it only crosses off those language in 20 and 21 to replace them with the additional language. So they still have to be verified as a homeless child or youth as defined by the federal McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. So those children that you're speaking of don't qualify under the federal act.
Other discussion. I think I heard the number of how many students currently. Did I hear 29? 192. Across the system? Okay.
Both community college and four-year schools.
Okay. Repeat the numbers, Senator.
192.
Okay, that's 2-year and 4-year colleges. That's 16 and 16. That's 32 campuses or 30 campuses, something like that. Okay, I think we adopted the amendment.
Where is Gallion when we need him?
Okay, a scarecrow. Discussion of the bill as amended before you. Seeing none, will anybody be voting no? Okay, we can avoid the roll call. We'll mark that as unanimous, and that'll be taken to the floor. 155. Next, please. Sorry, Senator.
Could I get out as a co-sponsor of this?
Sure.
Sure.
Senator Freyhester. Oh, okay. Okay, adding Senator Ellis to that bill as a co-sponsor. Okay.
Now I want to reconsider my vote.
That's called a sponsor problem. Okay, let's go to 167.
Senate Bill 167, State Board of Social Work Examiners, temporary license to practice social work. This is sponsored by Senator West. This bill authorizes the Board of Social Work Examiners to issue temporary licenses to practice social work to an applicant who has met all licensure requirements pertaining to education and experience but have not yet passed the board examination. The temporary license may be issued to either of the 4 licensing categories that exist under current law: temporary license to practice bachelor social work, temporary license to practice master social work, temporary license to practice certified social work, or temporary license to practice certified social work clinical. Each class of license has its own educational requirements and clinical requirements. Additionally, under this bill, the temporary license for the bachelor of social work and the master social work do require supervision. While the temporary license is effective, the latter two, certified social work clinical and certified social work, do not require that supervision. Finally, under the bill, the temporary license expires when the applicant fails the board exam, fails to submit board exam results, or finally receives permanent licensure. So it's an either-or scheme. Maryland Department of Health submitted unfavorable testimony, essentially saying that bypassing this exam requirement would be harmful to the prestige of the board. There are 2 amendments. One is a sponsor amendment, and one is an amendment by Senator Washington. The first sponsor amendment limits the temporary license to the first 2 categories. So the intent here is to ensure that supervision is required for the entirety of the temporary license. As mentioned, under those latter 2, supervision would not be required. So restricting it to the former 2, the licensees will have to be supervised. Senator Washington's amendment alters those expiration requirements where, under the proposed bill, the applicant either fails the board exam, fails to submit board exam results, or receives permanent licensure. Those are the 3 options by which that license expires. Under Senator Washington's proposed amendment, the license will expire either when the licensee gets their permanent license or 1 year from the issuance of the temporary license, whichever is sooner. So it cannot exceed 1 year under the proposed amendment.
So before we get into the 2 amendments, they're a little bit different. Let's get the bill on the floor. Is there a motion on the bill? It's been moved. It's been seconded. We have a bill. Senator Washington, do you want to move your amendment or the Senator West amendment? Your call.
I'd like to move the amendment that restricts it to the first categories requiring supervision. I think that helps the bill tremendously.
Just for clarification, does that work with your amendment, or you won't move your amendment?
No, I'm sorry. Did I apologize. I was moving Wes' amendment, the sponsor's amendment.
Right, and my question is, will you not be moving yours?
Oh, no, they're together. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, first,
I put that in there as well.
the amendment is the sponsor amendment, West amendment. Could you repeat how that would work again, Ms. Foxworth?
So I currently don't have them working together. I have them separately.
They are separate.
Okay.
One at a time. Let's take the West amendment.
Sure, okay. So under Senator West's amendment, just alters explicitly those supervision requirements. So we would only be able to create or issue these temporary licenses to practice bachelor social work and to practice master social work. And the intent of that is basically because the latter 2 categories, certified social work and certified social work clinical, they've already undergone those supervision requirements. Certified bachelor social work and master social work have not. So making sure that those 2 classes of categories will have to be supervised for the entirety of the effectiveness of the temporary license.
So then on page 2, lines 19 and 20 would come out?
There is a reprint. And so the amended language is on page 2 of the reprint. I'm sorry.
Okay. Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just need some clarification now. The amendment that Senator West is proposing will be open-ended. There will not be any time period for termination. As to opposed to Senator Washington's amendment, it will be limited void after 1 year. Is that the idea?
That's correct.
They both can be adopted. They don't run counter. His limits the categories for temporary license. So you can adopt one, you can adopt both. They don't run in different directions. They both can be utilized.
Okay, that's good to know. That I thought maybe you taking one, you kill
No,
the other.
his limits the window for the definition on page 51 of the packet, or 52 of the packet. The temporary license is only for a bachelor's or master's, as Ms. Foxworth said, not for the certified. Senator Carrozza.
Just to clarify, so Senator West's amendment, I thought, was focused on the supervision, and that's separate from the time frame issue. Okay. So we could vote for Senator West on the supervision and then support Senator Washington on the time limits. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, with the amendments, has MDH been contacted, and will they remove they have a pretty strongly worded opposition. So my question was, with the amendments, do they remove that opposition? Does anybody know?
I have not received favorable testimony in response to the amendments from MDH.
Okay, thank you.
Clarify, when we're saying the Department of Health, but it's really the Board of Social Work Examiners, not the entire department.
That's correct.
Just to clarify, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that clarity. Yep, that's correct.
Concern, but I don't want to speak for them. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm trying to catch up with this bill. I think I was away at another committee hearing when this was presented. So under current practice, I was under the impression that you can have temporary licensed social workers. So I'm not sure what does this bill change, which is not allowed now.
So under the current law, there is no scheme for temporary practice. This is creating that scheme for temporary. Yep. As it stands now, you have to, have the age requirement, the moral character, the background check. You have to complete your education and your your education and your clinical practice requirements, and you have to pass that examination. So what the temporary license is doing is saying that you can pass all of those aforementioned qualifications, but you don't have to pass that board exam.
Yeah. And, going back from my personal experience, I've known individuals who were employed as social workers pending the completion of the exam. And a few of those who haven't successfully completed, they were let go. So that's my practical knowledge of this. So I'm not sure what provision they were able to practice before, but now this is saying that it's not allowed. But from practical experience, I've known folks who've worked in social work while they're waiting on their results.
To provide a little bit of clarity. So they may be able to engage in the profession under supervision through those clinical hours, but they can't practice as licensed as licensed social workers without completing all of those requirements. So I'm not sure the specifics of the anecdotes that you provided, but they're able to engage in clinical practice, but licensure sets up a completely different scheme.
Okay, I think I understand. So this will grant them a temporary license to do all the things a social worker can do without the supervision of maybe the current process.
So yes and no. Temporary license to do all of the things, right, that the social work examiners can do. Mm-hmm. However, the supervision requirements is where we get into the amendment. So as drafted, the Bachelor of Social Work and the Master of Social Work do require that supervision. Mm-hmm. And the certified social worker and the certified social worker clinical do not require that supervision. So kind of a yes and no. So okay. Yes, if you are Bachelor of Social Work, Master of Social Work, temporary license, you have to have supervision. No to supervision if you're certified social work or certified social work clinical temporary license.
Okay.
Does that clarify it?
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry, this was just to answer Senator Ellis's question, which is, I think they may have completed their social work program. They may have gotten employment with someone. They just can't fully practice as a social worker until they actually get that license. So that's why it may seem as though they've started working or employment there, but they just haven't been able to do all the social work type things that they would otherwise be able to do if they were fully licensed at that point.
The temporary license. Any objection? If not, we'll adopt that amendment. Senator Washington, do you?
I reached out to the social workers and school social work and said what would be, we had some concern about that there's no real time when the temporary license is valid, that this period of notification or suspension, it seemed very discretionary. So they suggested that a year would be an appropriate amount of time that would allow for a reasonable amount of time for them to get that exam completed. So I'm moving, my amendment moves it to be a year.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for the purpose of asking a question.
Sure. We're going to take questions and debate. Senator Kagan.
Thank you. Senator Washington, do you happen to know from your social worker friend how often the test is given? I mean, for instance, while you're looking, if the test were given, let's say, once a year, that might be unreasonable. But if it's given every month, then that seems perfect.
Ms. Foxworth, do you know the answer to that?
I'm checking through my notes. I don't think I have anything here that specifically gives more information about that exam requirement. But I can certainly find that out for you, Senator Kagan.
Right. But without an amendment, and I'm not moving it yet, we might have to do some homework. If I failed the test once or twice or three times, I can retain my temporary license, correct?
So under the current bill, without amendments, it would expire if you took the board exam and failed it. Right. So it expires when you get the permanent license. So pass the exam. It's kind of duplicative, right? So C1 under 19309.1. So temporary license is valid until, which we can read to say temporary license expires when the licensee fails to complete the exam, or they don't submit those results to the board, or they pass the exam.
Yeah, no, I got that. I mean, well, somebody could not take the exam for 2 years.
That's correct, too. Right.
Okay. Senator Watt? I'm sorry.
So, right, there, the board doesn't specifically mandate when you have to take it. So you can, finish all of your clinical educational requirements for 5 years, you could go into another profession if you would like, and then come back and attempt to be licensed. But there is no window by which you have to take the board exam after you complete your educational and clinical requirements.
And so, committee and chairman, what this would do would be you wouldn't have that situation where someone could take it within a year. At any point, if they take it, they're, it's sudden death, I guess, or life. But this just put a time period on, so you don't have a situation where someone is operating with a license without finally taking their exam. Baltimore City ran into some challenges with this a few years ago, where we allowed teachers to teach without being fully certified. They had a certain amount of time that they could be certified, and then no one really circled around back to make sure that they were certified, and then there ends up a couple hundred teachers having to leave the classroom because of that. I think having a year puts a nice solid deadline, motivates the person to get this done, and provides some surety for the board, I hope, that there aren't unlicensed social workers out there forever.
Ms. Goodman, you know a little bit about the testing centers.
Okay, good.
Nations for licensing, where they used to be, you'd have to sit like once or twice a year. Now, essentially, these are computer programs. Once you've gotten approval from a board to take the examination, you can schedule an appointment and then go into one of the centers and take the examination. So it's not a required sitting once or twice a year. So that's kind of how the examinations work.
And then just to add to that, so it sounds like these testing centers are closed right now because of COVID. So it's just like, it's like a Pearson testing center. You go in, you sit before a computer, you go through all that. But those testing centers are closed right now, so they actually can't complete the exam right now. I think that's the main problem here.
Well, I mean, we could add emergency language if we're under an emergency. I mean, look, we're setting policy going forward as well as setting it now. Let's first stay with the Washington Amendment of putting a cap on how long you can be temporary and not take or pass the test. Discussion on the amendment. We can also entertain another one in terms of emergency if that's needed. Okay, all those in favor of the Washington Amendment, raise your hand. It's unanimous. Okay. The Washington Amendment is adopted. Do we need Senator Lamb to add language during a certified emergency? Or would you suggest that? Or anybody else for that matter?
Sure, that I think is needed. I think what we're, as amended, I think it allows them to be able to address this issue.
And I would say the bill has an effective date of October 1, and then if we include the year, it would be October 1, 2022.
Right.
Yeah, God forbid this goes on for another year and a half or whatever. Okay, the bill as amended is before you. We've adopted the West Amendment. We've adopted the Washington Amendment. Discussion on the bill is amended. Seeing none, will anybody voting against it? If not, we will register it as unanimous and send it to the floor. Next bill.
Senate Bill 180. Funeral establishments and crematories, unclaimed remains of veterans, notification, disposition, and reporting. This is sponsored by Senator Simonaire. This bill discusses the transfer of the remains of a veteran into possession of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Current law requires a funeral establishment to give identifying information to a veteran service organization if those cremains have been unclaimed for a certain time. Then, the veteran service organization must notify the funeral establishment of the following. These are the mandatory notice procedures, indicating 1, whether the cremains are of a veteran or an eligible dependent, and 2, indicating whether the veteran or eligible dependent is eligible for burial in a veteran cemetery. After receiving notice, the funeral establishment may transfer those cremains to the Veteran Service Organization. The bill would require a licensed funeral establishment to notify the Department of Veterans Affairs and to transfer the unclaimed cremains that are eligible for burial in the state's veteran cemetery to the Department of Veterans Affairs if a veteran service organization does not take possession of those cremains within 10 days after those aforementioned notice requirements. There are no amendments and no opposition, and the Maryland Board of Morticians and Funeral Directors did sign testimony as favorable.
Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded, and no, it is not dead on arrival. So, discussion on the bill. Seeing none. That wasn't your support, was it? I could have
said you don't want this bill to go down in ashes, but I'm not going to do
it. Right. Okay. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, quick question, Senator Simon there. So this bill sends the cremains to the Department of Veterans Affairs as a last resort. So if that's done, will they accept it? Or are they mandated by law to accept it?
The veterans support the Department of Veterans support this to go in the state cemetery. So I don't know. I don't have the language in front of me. If it's a shell, maybe she can, while I'm pulling it up.
From a mic. So it is mandatory language. If like you said, as a last resort, I think that's a good way of framing it. They have to notify and they have to transfer. So they have to comply with those 3 notification requirements that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. And they do end up having to transfer those cremains to the Department of Veterans Affairs.
And so is that the State Department of Veterans or the federal?
That's the
state.
Right, yeah, the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs.
Maryland, okay. And that's pretty much clear in the bill. It goes to the Maryland Department of.
I'm trying to see if they specifically define it in here. That's the implication, but it says Department of Veterans Affairs. So usually when they list it that way, it's specifically state. They would have specifically said federal as an indication, but it doesn't, directly define it in the bill, but it's referenced in the state.
And if I could say, also in the language, it says that they will put them in the state veteran cemetery, which is controlled by the State Department of Veterans Affairs.
Okay, so a lot of times with these veterans issues, there's like confusion, and you end up in this really, how should I say, a no man's zone where things just remain confused. So as long as it's clear in the bill, and I take your word for it, that it's the State Department of Veterans Affairs.
And I've also coordinated with the department, and in a rare case, they actually put a letter of support for the bill in the committee testimony.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Will anybody be voting against this bill? If not, we can. I haven't heard any opposition.
No.
If no objection, we will also record that one as unanimous and send it to the floor. Next bill.
Senate Bill 239, St. Mary's County Public and Non-Public Schools, Prohibition on Possession of Tobacco Products by Minors. This bill prohibits a minor from possessing a tobacco product at any time inside a school building or on the school grounds in St. Mary's County. For a first offense, a violator must attend a tobacco cessation program. For a second and third or subsequent offenses, a violator is subject to maximum civil penalties of $50 and $100 respectively. There is one amendment sent by the sponsor, and I emailed that to the members of the committee about 15 minutes before the hearing. This alters the penalties to take out the civil penalties for the second and third and subsequent offenses. And at the first offense, it requires a parent meeting with the student. For the second offense, requires attendance at the tobacco cessation program, and for the third or subsequent offenses, it requires attendance at another tobacco cessation program and up to 4 hours of community service.
Yes.
Move
Madam Vice
unfavorable.
Chairman.
Move unfavorable.
Is there a second? I see a second. Discussion on the bill.
If I could speak briefly. So I don't like tobacco. I don't like cigarettes. I don't like being around it. I don't want young people to smoke and get addicted. We have a cigarette restitution fund with a lot of money because of the addictive nature and, national suits. Having said that, this is, in my view, and I asked about this in the hearing, this is an open invitation to discriminate against students of color. It's or the troublemaker. We've got another excuse now to penalize you, and I think it's a well-intentioned bad idea. So I hope we kill this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion. Senator Fry Hester, followed by Senator Simon Ayer.
Thank you. I hadn't actually seen the amendment before now, given that it was emailed to us 15 minutes ago, and I wonder if we could just understand what the amendment does, because I think is that possible?
I'll explain again. So essentially, all it does is change the penalties, where before in the bill is drafted, the first penalty was the attendance at the tobacco cessation program. That is now replaced with a parent meeting. On the second offense, where it was now a civil penalty of $50, it is now attendance at the tobacco cessation program. And now for a third or subsequent offense, instead of a $100 civil penalty, it is now another attendance at a tobacco cessation program, and where is this here? And then up to 4 hours of community service.
Thank you. So does this remove the law enforcement completely or not?
Yes, there's no enforcement at all. This is mostly just about how the school will handle this, because it's possessing products on school property or on school grounds.
Thank you.
Thank you. I understand this is a local bill?
That's my question.
So you're suggesting we go unfavorable on a local courtesy bill, just so I get it clear. But anyway, I mean, the argument the vice chair said is, we shouldn't try to get them to stop smoking because it could target racial and do this and this. I mean, if you took that argument, you would say, get rid of fighting, and you can't fight, you can't drink, you can't do anything. I don't know why you're just picking out tobacco as a problem that they're having in St. Mary's County. They brought forth legislation. They heard the testimony of some of the concerns with the fines. So he's worked with it, and he's come back and says, we're going to take the fines out. We're just going to try to work with our school, meeting with parents, have classes. And I think it's a good approach to try to stop this serious problem of the young people getting the jewels, and it's just getting expanded. And I would certainly hope we would allow for local courtesy, as this is not a statewide implication.
Yes, do we have a letter on file? Okay. All right.
Just to the local courtesy, there are limits to that if it sets a precedent or if it's counter to a statewide value. So we don't allow discrimination locally. So we just to that. So I think we can just take it on its merit and not necessarily pass it just because it's offered as a local bill. I guess my question is, if it's not codifying if it's not creating a law or a civil violation, then why do you need a bill? I don't think we need the bill. So Yeah, so that's why I would be opposed to the bill at this point, that the amendments don't solve the problem, one, and two, I don't believe it's necessary for us to pass this.
Before I call on the vice chairwoman, to Ms. Goodman, if the criminal and civil, well, it wasn't criminal, it was civil, has been taken out, is there any reason local school board couldn't do this?
To require a student caught on school property to attend to tobacco. I mean, that they could put it in their student conduct manual as part of their disciplinary. I don't, they can definitely do that without a bill. Yes.
Madam Vice Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Senator Washington did a great job talking about local courtesy. I'll just add, because some of our colleagues are newer and we haven't had so many controversial local bills, but local bills, one of the examples might be the Dorchester County Sheriff's salary. That's a truly local bill. It must come through the Senate. It must be considered by the General Assembly and enacted into law in order to give their sheriff a raise. This is not that. This is a policy measure, and it does have statewide implications, and so that's why we get to look at it through a different lens. So traditionally, as the minority leader knows, there is something called local courtesy, but it's a bit of a red herring to call this a local bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Riley.
Can I hold this bill for a couple days to talk to the sponsor, please?
Sure. Every bill gets a hold. One hold. Okay.
Thank you.
I would say this, Senator, when you speak to him, if he doesn't put in the amendment, I think there are a lot of people who feel it's too stringent. And if they put in the amendment, then it's not needed. So I would just share that with him, that it might be a rock and a hard place. Thank you. Okay.
Just wanted to follow up on that. I mean, this is a local bill. We can debate if it's statewide implications, but by the very definition, it is a local bill if you look at the title. And the other thing, I just have a little problem, and maybe you can clarify, maybe Senator Washington, you said basically we don't allow discrimination. And if you could show in here in this bill where there's discrimination, that's a pretty harsh statement.
I'll say that I wasn't implying that this particular bill was impugning discrimination. I was just saying an example that if a local jurisdiction wanted to enact a law that was counter to state law, that we would not allow that. So okay. I'll clarify, and also just making sure there's no disrespect or misinterpretation for Senator Bailey. I find him to be a fine, upstanding man and senator, and know that he and I share values on fairness and equity in all matters.
Also implied that this would lead to discrimination, so I also want to speak. It wasn't just Senator Washington. Statistically, students of color have higher levels of detention, higher levels of expulsion, higher levels of all that. So there is a likelihood that there would be disproportionate and unequal enforcement against students of color. There's no guarantee. It doesn't say that. I'm not suggesting that that's for sure, but that's one of the reasons that I would be gravely concerned about this bill, as I raised in the hearing and then again today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think going back to the fact that it's, a local bill being offered by one of our former committee colleagues, and many of us knew that he had offered an amendment that we wanted to have that, and before we could even put that out there, to have a move unfavorable out of the gate when it was a local bill, knowing there was also an amendment to address some of the questions, was a little unsettling for some of us.
Okay, well, we have a hold, so I don't want to debate the substance. We are going to vote some bills down. We don't, if we have some things that we don't want to send to the floor, either for whatever reason, we're going to have to deal with that. And it's going to be sometimes our own members, other members. I think we all understand it happens. It's happened to me plenty of times. So we shouldn't be hesitant. And at times we will recognize an unfavorable. If it doesn't get 6 votes, then it turns into a favorable. So we're going to deal with this. And whether there's an amendment or not, I think it's a difficult situation. Senator Simon Ayer.
One last comment. If our standard becomes that there's possible discrimination, that we don't enact the law, we'll never meet it. I think we should go after the problem of why people are discriminating and attack that. But to say, if we don't want our students in school smoking, saying, well, there could be possible discrimination against that, we can't enact the law, that's the reverse way. You go at the school system, why they're discriminating, and you address that, not the fact that we don't want them smoking. That's all I'll say.
Cut off the conversation. I mean, look, people can assert anything. And again, for me, it was either too stringent or not needed. It had nothing to do with discrimination. I have my own views on that, but we'll try to keep to as much facts and objectivity as we can, but people have their own lenses they use in terms of making judgments, and at the end of the day, we'll take a vote and see how it plays out. Okay, next bill, please.
Senate Bill 249, Higher Education, Senatorial Scholarships, Program Accreditation. This emergency bill allows a senatorial scholarship to be used as an out-of-state institution when an academic area is not offered at an accredited program in the state. Specifically, the program must be accredited by a national accrediting association approved by the U.S. Department of Education. There are no amendments, and there said there was opposition, but for some reason it didn't upload into the system.
Is there a motion on the bill? Favorable. It's moved. Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the bill. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I thought this prohibition was in there already for out of state, and you have to get permission from the Maryland Higher Education Commission to offer senatorial scholarship to a student who wants a particular major, but it's not offered in Maryland. I know I processed, like, so far 4 of them in my 2 years here. It was hard work, but we did it. And as a matter of fact, one student went to a school in Pennsylvania for music therapy major, which is not offered in Maryland, and they were approved. So I'm not sure what this bill will do differently than that's authorized now.
Yeah, Senator, this is one more layer down. In other words, if MHEC says you can't go out of state because there is a school, this bill says, yes, there's a school, but if it's unaccredited, you can't use that as a justification for not going out of state. It's got to be accredited, it can't be unaccredited.
Okay.
Is that? Yeah. Senator Riley.
Senator Ellis, of all the things we hope our students are doing, are working toward degrees which are recognized and accepted. We have had a lot of testimony in this committee about for-profit colleges that were not accredited. And we shouldn't be spending our money for those types of non-accredited, our tax money. If somebody decides to spend their own personal money, that's their choice. But this is our tax money, and it should be directed so that people can transfer credits or get a degree from an accredited organization. So I'm very supportive of the bill.
And Senator Ellis, so this will actually make it easier for someone to go out of state. In other words, it's got to be accredited. And if there's a school, they can't say you got to stay in state if it's not accredited, which would allow another opportunity to pursue out-of-state education using the senatorial scholarship. Okay, further discussion. And if it's unaccredited, they go to a smoking cessation program, right? Okay, anybody object to this legislation? Seeing none, we will vote it as unanimous and send it to the floor. Next, please.
Senate Bill 298, State Board of Pharmacy Closure Notice to Customers, also known as the Dennis Robin Act. This is sponsored by Senator Riley. The bill outlines mandatory notice requirements that a pharmacist must abide by before closing. The bill requires a notice to be posted 30 days before closing or requires the outgoing pharmacy to mail a notice 14 days before closing. The notice that is either posted or mailed must indicate, number one, the date of closing, if available. Number two, the name of the pharmacy that prescriptions will be transferred to. And number three, must indicate that a customer may request their records be sent to another pharmacy. The bill requires the Board of Pharmacy to define closing of a pharmacy, that phrase, and to provide exceptions to the requirements listed. There was no opposition presented during testimony, and there is one amendment from Senator Pinsky.
Bill on the floor. Is there a motion? It's been moved. It's been seconded. Senator Raleigh, and I apologize for not getting to you. The bill says you can either post a notice or mail. My guess is, because mailing costs money, they'll be mostly posting notices. And in terms of consumer protection, and some people don't come but every 30 days, the amendment I have, which is on page 54, says either one of the other two things, either mailing or posting, and providing written and verbal notice to each customer who picks up a prescription or refill. So in other words, I come in 30 days out. I may or may not have seen the postage, and I'm not getting any mail. So the person behind the counter should say, look, we're closing in 30 days. All the prescriptions are being sent to X. And when they give them the prescription, there's a hard copy sheet that explains the stuff to them. I just think we have to lean over to take care of the constituents and not let them be hanging. And some places are going to close fairly quickly, sell out to another big chain, and I just don't know if, while you would think they're going to make an extra effort to get their business and be in contact with them, I think we ought to put a few more safeguards in place. And if it's a hard copy, it's not expensive. I'm not requiring the mailing, which I prefer, but I think this is fairly basic and simple. So,
Very happy to accept that.
okay. On the amendment, Senator Ellis.
So, Mr. Chairman, you're saying that requiring a 30-day period notice? Because that's in the bill.
On page 1, line 20.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying you support that 30-day period in the bill for notice?
Yeah, as I read this, and is this, Alexis, is this yours? Yes. One second. It's 30 days you must put a notice, mm-hmm. and if you do a mailing, it's got to be 14 days.
Okay.
And so this says you can do either one, mm-hmm. and if somebody comes in, you have to tell them and also give a sheet of paper saying we're closing and go to this location.
Okay. So, thank you for clarifying. So under that rationale you gave, which makes sense, folks come in, pick up their medicine, say 30-day supply. There are a lot of people who have a 90-day supply, and they, maximum. And so I know some of these people personally, so so it's a fact. So under that rationale, if someone coming in every 90 days, should that notice be up for a 90-day period? I don't know if that's practical. I'm not sure. I'm thinking if it's the intent for that long, or, but I'm just picking up on your discussion, Mr. Chair.
I agree, and the Vice Chairwoman brought this up yesterday when we had a late conversation. I mean, some 90-day people will get it mailed to their house, and this becomes a non-issue. But you're right, some people will get 90. I just didn't know, one, if they're going to know they're closing in 90 days out, and and it's a long time. And I'm not even sure the pharmacies are happy with my amendment. I think they'd really go crazy with dealing with 90 days. I mean, I understand it, and I'm sympathetic. I just don't know if that's a bridge too far or not. But Senator Riley?
Very much. As a
Senator
person,
Ellis will come back to you if you have it.
as a person who has gone through this extended 90-day prescription process, when I go to the doc or I have my telehealth, they give me a script for 30 days, and the insurance company requires that if we need maintenance drugs, that it's on a mail order. And the mail order, we don't care where it's being mailed from. This is specifically for that local community pharmacy. And in any event, I'm very happy with your amendment and like to move the bill as amended.
I just have a question, since I just recently went through one of these pharmacies that closed in my district. I just want to understand that, Mr. Chair, your amendment is basically adds to the base bill about both a time frame and is it both a written and verbal notice to each individual customer? I'm just trying to understand how the practicality of how this would work.
3 days before the anticipated closing of the pharmacy, posting a notice that is conspicuously positioned in the pharmacy and readable by pharmacy customers, and if applicable on the pharmacy's website, and providing written and verbal notice to each customer who picks up a prescription or refill. So I come in for a refill. The person behind the counter says, you need to understand we're closing in 20 days or 30 days, and you should go to this pharmacy at Costco or wherever, and then there should be a sheet of paper, whether it's half sheet or a sheet, saying they're closing, here's a website, and here's where you should go.
Okay, but
so I'm not.
But it doesn't require a mailing to every customer who ever had a prescription at this pharmacy.
No, this does not. This is not a mailing, because line 2 on page 2, then it goes to or. Either you give it out when they come in and you post it on the front door or the front window, and then it goes to or doing a mailing. This mailing is separate on line 4, page 2. And my amendment says providing written and verbal when they come in to pick up a prescription. So it's explicitly not requiring paying postage.
And it's not requiring a notification of every customer who ever had a prescription at this pharmacy?
No, it says when they pick up a prescription or refill.
Only when. Okay. Thank you.
Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Were there any opposition to this bill?
Senator Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They're concerned about that 30-day, the original bill, I think, had a 30-day mailing requirement. Now we've lowered it to 14 days and made it optional. So I believe the opposition has disappeared.
So no opposition. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As amended. Seeing none, will anybody be voting against it? Okay, then we'll vote, show this as unanimous as amended and send it to the floor. Okay, 313, I believe.
Senate Bill 313, Maryland Department of Health, Public Health Outreach Programs, Cognitive Impairment, Alzheimer's Disease, and Other Types of Dementia, sponsored by Senator Washington. The bill pertains to cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's and public health outreach. The bill mandates that the Maryland Department of Health, in partnership with listed councils and organizations, incorporate information in its public health materials with the goals of increasing or educating health providers on early assessment and detection of cognitive impairment, increasing understanding and awareness of Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, educating on the importance of early detection and other ways to reduce cognitive decline amongst Black and Latino communities, to name a few. There was no opposition presented at testimony. Maryland Department of Health did request an amendment in their testimony for a slight change to change educate health providers, which is that mandate, changing that to educate health providers and family caregivers to make it a bit more expansive.
Yeah, I think Department of Health had some other concerns. I think there were, I thought I saw a sheet that they thought it should be taken up in 2022. Did I read? Hold on. Senator Washington.
They're actually wanting me to reintroduce the bill in 2022. That's so that's a different sort of thing. And I really, I respect them, but I believe October 1st this bill could begin to take effect. COVID doesn't stop the fact that dementia and Alzheimer's are ravaging our communities and our senior centers. So I would just say that we should just proceed and ask for a favorable report of the bill as drafted.
I'm not sure, but it's been moved and seconded. Just to ask a question, Senator Washington, and I only was able to look at some of the testimony. I mean, look, I don't know if they're overworked or not. Is there any relevance in giving them a few extra months to get through this? I don't know. I don't know how many staff and what kind of work and preparing documents. I don't know how inundated they are. I think the rollout's been chaotic. So I have my own criticisms of them. I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not falling on a sword here. I just wanted to.
Right.
I wouldn't suggest pushing it back a year or postponing it. That's for sure.
Well, it's not June. It's October of 21. What do you are you suggesting a time?
We know the frontline people are working their rear ends off. Are the administrative people in their health departments?
So they would have the ability to hire a qualified community health educator. There's any number of ways to do this. But again, I just pressed to the committee, and I know we have the support of this, that this disease is only being exacerbated by COVID, and the need to do specific outreach and education grows.
That's a favorable motion before us, moved and seconded. Discussion. Will anybody be voting against it? Seeing none, it passed unanimously and is sent to the floor.
Senate Bill 319, Clean Energy Loan Program, Remediation and Resiliency. This bill expands the types of projects that may be financed under a clean energy loan program enacted by a county or municipality by adding water efficiency projects, environmental remediation projects, and resiliency projects. The bill requires that an ordinance or resolution that establishes a clean energy loan program include a specified provision applicable to any project regarding the repayment term of the loan. There is an amendment that was emailed to you today. It should also be on your desk, being offered by the sponsor of the bill, Senator Hester. This was in response to the favorable with amendments testimony that MEA provided on the bill. The amendment would define the term grid resiliency project, and that would also allow these programs to be used to fund grid resiliency projects if installed with energy efficiency projects.
Is there a motion on the bill?
Move favorable, and I have a question for the
It's been moved, it's been seconded. The bill is before you. Should we move the amendment first, or you want to talk about the bill?
I'll move the amendment, but I have a question for the sponsor.
Okay, the amendment's been moved and seconded. The bill The amendment is before you, and now we go to a question from the Vice Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Hester, I thought I just heard said that this amendment was from Maryland Environmental Service. It's got your name on it. I just want to clarify that means you fully support this and think it makes it a better bill? I missed something. I just want to make sure that that's accurate.
Yes, it's from the Maryland Energy Association, MEA, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm looking at the fiscal note for this bill, and it says there's no impact, no fiscal impact. So if we expand the loan program, that means more money is available. Which entity will grant that additional funds to expand the loan?
So this is an existing program where the Maryland, the PACE program grants loans the money at a reduced rate, and you're allowed to attach it to the mortgage of the project for energy efficiency. And so the original bill expanded it to include like resiliency projects, like flood resiliency projects. We then had people who liked it so much they wanted to add like air and mold remediation projects. So that got added. And then the Maryland Energy Administration came up and they said, hey, we've got these grid resiliency projects. So it doesn't cost the state anything. It's a loan that whoever owns the property and is doing the improvement, it takes out and pays over time.
So you're saying the state is the one who loans these groups and individuals the funds?
Hold on.
Answer that. So this is an existing program. It's all private capital. So these are private loans. What makes it special is that to enable this program, a county or a local jurisdiction has to adopt an ordinance that essentially allows these loans to become a lien on the property. So that's how it gets paid back, and it's particularly useful for things like energy efficiency projects where the person, who's making the change, using the money, is making some improvement to the property, typically that is going to kind of pay back dividends in terms of energy savings or, reduce costs dealing with things like flooding or whatever else kind of needs to be addressed at the property.
Okay, so privately funded, and this bill give the local jurisdiction to, you said, put a lien on the property so that the individual can receive the loan.
Yes, so you're allowed to take you're allowed to take the cost of the project and integrate it, so you pay it off over time along with your mortgage.
Okay, great.
So you can pay it off on your property taxes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a weird sort of partnership that sort of happens between the local jurisdiction and the private lender, where it's actually the money, you as the property owner, you get the loan from a private entity, but then you make payments on that loan. They get wrapped into your property taxes, so you make them to the county that then sort of remits it back to the private lender. And if you default, it's a lien on your property. Okay.
And so this has been working for other entities really good?
Right. So a number of counties have these programs now, but right now it's narrowly limited to energy efficiency projects. This expands the purposes that you can use these loans for.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation.
Further questions? Anybody object to adopting the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment's adopted. The bill as amended is before you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, anybody voting against it? Seeing no objection, we will mark it as unanimous and send it to the floor. Last bill.
All right, Senate Bill 347. This is the Environment Public Hearing and Notification Modernization Act. This is a departmental bill from the Maryland Department of the Environment. This bill modifies public participation and notice requirements for a number of licensing, permitting, and regulatory promulgation sections of the Environment article. Generally, the bill, 1, authorizes public hearings and meetings to be held using teleconference or internet-based conferencing technology, and 2, public notices to be published electronically on the Maryland Department of the Environment's website in lieu of newspaper publication. The bill applies to authorizations issued for controlling air emissions and water pollution discharges, drilling of oil and gas wells, non-coal surface mining, constructing and operating solid waste facilities, sewage sludge utilization, and activities that would disturb Maryland wetlands and waterways. There are 2 amendments, again, that were emailed out to you and should be on your desk. The first is by request of MDE, the Maryland Department of the Environment. Their amendment defines the term internet-based conferencing technology to specify that the technology must include a call-in number for telephones. There's also an amendment being offered by Senator Pinsky that does a couple of things. First, it specifies that the department must allow people on the list of interested persons for purposes of notices related to the appropriation and use of waters, dams, and reservoirs and non-tidal wetland permits to choose how they wish to be contacted by email, mail, or both. The Pinsky Amendment also specifies the provisions authorizing MDE to hold virtual meetings in lieu of in-person meetings during states of emergency only apply to states of emergency lasting 2 weeks or longer. This, is coming out of some discussion around when this bill was previously on a voting list, where people were concerned that they might use a state of emergency that was declared for something like a snowstorm that just lasts a couple of days as an excuse to move a in-person meeting online when it might be more appropriate to just delay the meeting. For what it's worth, MDE has taken a look at these amendments and they have no objections.
Okay. First motion on the bill, it's moved and seconded. Any objection to the MDE amendment on their definitions? I guess that's the one that's called leave blank by request. Any objection to the MDE amendments? Senator Patterson.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to hold this for 1 week if I could, please.
We'll hold it. I'm not sure when the next voting's.
That's all I ask.
It's a hold.
Okay.
Let me one question, then I'm going to give it to the Vice Chairwoman. We're hearing 10 bills a day. That's 40 a week. We just moved 10 or 12 bills. We're starting to back up a little bit. And we've generally been doing easy bills. Most of them were unanimous today. Going forward, they're a little more complicated, won't be unanimous. So I think we're going to have to try to push through some bills on Friday. Now we have a couple of options. We can try to spend an hour, 10:45 to 11:45 before we go in, and then pick back up sometime after the morning session plus 30 or 45 minutes. Or we can not try to do anything in the morning and just wait till the afternoon. Now, I know some people have some responsibilities later in the afternoon. I said we wouldn't go past, did I say 4:30? And if we're in from 12 to 1:30 gives us 3 hours of work. Look, I'd like to make it faster. I don't want to keep people to 4:30 on a Friday, at least not yet. And I can't tell you, I haven't even made up the list yet, so I can't even tell you how many bills are on it. But if we don't get through it, we don't get through it. So how many people would like to start and get an hour in before the floor session? Raise your hand. Not all at once. Okay, that's not real popular. Okay, then we will start. Okay, we will start post-floor in 30 minutes, probably, or 20 minutes, whatever. And we'll try to end by 4:30. So we go into 12, that's 1:30. Hopefully we can get in 3 hours of work. And we will get you the voting list hopefully by tomorrow afternoon, so you'll have a day to look at it. Any questions on our schedule? Senator?
Do it, are we going to be able to do it right, like immediately after sessions? We can, the session's not till 12, correct? So we could have lunch early before session, then come right to vote after and get done a little quicker?
I would love to do that. The only thing that's held us up is we've had to put it online because of the open meetings law. And I think, Lamore, can we say immediately after session? It's up to you folks. But again, and I hate to be a curmudgeon here, I've encouraged no eating during session because then we have our masks off and it increases the opportunity for passing stuff on. So it does mean either eating a later lunch or eating before. So it's up to you folks how you want to handle this.
Half hour.
Okay. Okay. It'll be 30 minutes from the end of session. I can't tell you what the agenda is on session on Friday. I don't know how many reports there'll be. I mean, the HBCU should go fast. I don't know about the Relief Act. Again, I don't think there's a lot of controversy, so I don't think it should be a super long meeting. So just assume we go into 12, and it'll be 30 minutes from when we end. Madam Vice Chairman.
You get it. Thank you. Thanks, Lamar. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Publicly announcing the Health Occupations Subcommittee, which is mostly, I think, this section of the room here. We had a doodle, and there was no consensus. So we offered 3 different times, and we just couldn't get the numbers. So we are looking for either Tuesday immediately after session or Wednesday immediately after committee. Sorry, either Tuesday immediately after committee or Wednesday immediately after committee. So I'm announcing that publicly that that's what we're thinking about. Our legal counsel is available on both of those days. And so if you guys are able to look at your calendars now and let me know your preference so we can announce it in time to be compliant, that would be great. I don't expect it to be long. There are 3 bills, and any senators who are not on health occupations who want to observe or weigh in are welcome, but it is the 4 here plus me.
So committee, one of those days will probably be a voting session. I don't know which one. So be prepared for both of those, and we will get back to you. But one of those days after session, the health subcommittee will meet, and the other day we will have a voting session. Any questions, concerns for the good of the order? Okay, have a great evening.